Hunt 'em Big with Steve Bartilla. Brought to you by Wildlife Research Center, the gold standard. Reconics, see what you've been missing. Get armed and deadly with Easton's FMJ arrows. The heater bodysuit, you stay warm or your money back. And Hunter's Safety System, saving lives is what we do.
If you really want to score big during the rut, know your doe groups. If you know your doe groups, guess what? You understand what Mr. Big is after. Mr. Big is after breeding opportunities during the rut. That is his purpose. He is a breeding machine. Okay. Unlike the young bucks, he doesn't run around the woods like an idiot. Okay. He's a seasoned veteran. He understands, he gets it. He's been through the battles. He understands what scraping's all about. He understands what rubbing's all about. He understands how to use his nose to find those does. Over and over and over growing up, I heard you can't pattern deer during the rut. Forget about growing up. Heck, I still hear it to this day. You cannot pattern bucks during the rut. Baloney. For one thing, the whole idea of patterning a buck, the way most of us experts say we do it, baloney. Now, none of us know where that buck is 24/7, 365. It's not the case. Patterns change throughout the course of the season. Each rut phase has its own purpose. It has its own drivers for the bucks. You look at early season, all it is about going ahead and trying to fatten up. Fatten up, lead nice, fat and sassy life up until the rut comes. Now you get into the scrape phase. At that point, it's all about advertising. It's all about advertising your presence to all the other deer in the woods. Okay, rubs, they're more of an intimidation. And frankly, giving yourself a workout, building up those neck muscles for fighting. During that peak scrape phase, that's when most of the serious fights happen. They're going ahead and they're making up their pecking order in the buck hierarchy, and then you get to the chase phase. At that point, a handful of does have already come into estrus early. Mr. Big realizes, man, we're right on the cusp, we're right there, and he turns into a kid. He can't help himself. He starts running around the woods chasing darn near every doe that's on the edge. Okay, then you get to the breeding phase. The breeding phase, it's all about breeding, and that's what we're trying to talk about today. How do you pattern that buck during the rut? Okay. You know what? During the scrape phase, you happen to know where 2 or 3 of his primary scrapes are. You got his pattern. You understand some of the spots that he's likely to go. Now, he's not always going to go, but he's likely to go there. You don't have to know where he's bedding, although it sure doesn't hurt to know where he's coming from. Okay, that is patterning a deer. Okay. How is that any different than when you get that picture of that mature buck 2, 3, 4 times a week checking that doe bedding area? Not one darn bit different. Now, he understands that to find does, first, he knows his home range. He knows the family groups within his home range and where they're likely to be at any point in the 24-hour period. Then, what does he do? He does nothing more than go from doe concentration to doe concentration, where they are at that point in time during the day, checking them most often with his nose to see if there happens to be an estrus doe. If there isn't, one swing on the downwind side of that doe bedding area, doesn't smell any does, hey, he can go ahead and run off to the next doe bedding area. If you know your doe groups on your hunting ground, you know where they bed, and if they have these defined bedding areas, such as a 2-acre swamp, a half-acre stand of evergreens that are nice and thick, that top of the ridge where they bed. If you have some type of defined edge, now you can set up on the downwind sides. You can set up on the sides when the wind's blowing in a certain direction. You can pick the stand that's on the downwind side. You're playing into Mr. Big's hand. You're playing right into the way he tries to find doe groups. And we can even get a little tricky here, and that this isn't going to apply to most people. But those that hunt ground where you intimately know your doe groups to the point where you can tell which ones are dominant, because they're the ones that when they come out to those food sources, they chase absolutely everything off. If the deer population numbers are ridiculously high, that means that those doe groups on the very bottom rung of the dominance ladder, they got it tough. They have it tough. They're nowhere near as healthy because the dominant groups choose all the best of everything. Food, cover, water, safety, security, you name it. When you start getting down to those lowest doe groups on that hierarchy, you're left with nothing but scraps. And if you're dealing with an overpopulated area, those scraps aren't good enough. So, just from that, we can conclude that your dominant doe groups on those grounds are going to be the healthiest. The subordinate doe groups on those grounds aren't. Who comes into estrus first every year, especially in the Midwest and points north? Your healthiest adult does. Well, guess what? Those dominant doe groups, you just might find them there. Okay, who comes in latest? The unhealthy adult does and doe fawns. The second rut actually isn't made up of all these does that were missed the first go around. What it is it's made up of doe fawns. Now, doe fawns can breed their first year as soon as they meet certain physical and physiological thresholds, as soon as they grow up. Now, those well-timed dropped fawns in the Midwest, the overwhelming majority of those doe fawns breed. Even some of the later ones do. When you get up to when you start getting up to north, up there, it's your best timed birth fawns that tend to breed. Okay, particularly when they came off of a really light winter. Okay, when mom came off of a light winter, she drops the fawns early, but the temperatures are good enough, and they end up growing up enough to come into estrus that first year. So, when we get late in the rut, now we might want to target those low-end family groups for the adult does that are coming in late, and we can target, again, those more dominant family groups. Why? Because guess what? They have the best of everything, so do their fawns. So their doe fawns have a higher odds of coming into estrus than the ones from those medium range family groups, and lower as well. When you know your does, as I said, that doesn't apply to everybody, and frankly, even when it does apply to your ground, it does not change the world. What it is just one more tip, one more little thing that you can do to tilt the odds in your favor, because when you know the does on your ground, whether it's that or where they're bedding, where they're going to be feeding, now, guess what? We have a huge advantage of setting up on Mr. Big. You really want to make sense out of the rut? You want to pattern Mr. Big during the rut, find what he's looking for, and get to know him. The family groups are where it's at during the rut, because that is where the estrus does are. You learn their locations, of where they bed, where they feed, how they travel. And in some cases, learn their dominance hierarchy simply by observing food sources while you're out there hunting. The does tell you which family group's dominant and which isn't. Now, you do those things, you have a big head start on the rut, and all of a sudden it isn't chaos. All of a sudden, guess what? The rut makes sense. And you can bring order to that otherwise chaotic period of time.